But the real conflict might be about respect, autonomy, or fear of failure. A romantic couple might fight about household chores, but the underlying issue might be about feeling valued or supported. A parent and teenager might battle over curfew, but the deeper conflict might be about independence and safety. The first principle of conflict transformation is shifting from positions to interests. Positions are what people say they want. I need you to be home by 10 o'clock. I deserve a promotion this year. You need to clean up after yourself. Interests are the underlying needs and concerns that drive these positions. Safety, recognition, respect, fairness, autonomy. When you focus on interests rather than positions, you often discover that people's underlying needs are not in conflict at all. The parent wants their teenager to be safe, and the teenager wants to be trusted and have freedom. Both needs can be met through creative solutions that rigid position-taking would never reveal. To identify interests, ask questions that go beneath the surface demands. Instead of arguing about what someone wants, explore why they want it. Help me understand what's most important to you about this. What would need to happen for you to feel good about this situation? What are you most concerned about? The second principle is emotional validation before problem solving. Most people try to solve conflicts by immediately jumping into negotiations and compromises. But this approach fails when people are emotionally activated. When someone feels angry, hurt, or misunderstood, their rational problem-solving abilities are compromised. They need emotional acknowledgement before they can engage in productive dialogue. Emotional validation doesn't mean you agree with someone's position or behavior. It means you acknowledge their feelings and show that you understand their experience. I can see that you're really frustrated about this. It sounds like you're feeling unheard. I understand that this situation is really important to you. Validation has a powerful calming effect because it meets people's fundamental need to be understood. When people feel heard and acknowledged, their defensive reactions often decrease dramatically. They become more open to hearing your perspective and more willing to work toward mutually beneficial solutions. The third principle is collaborative exploration rather than adversarial debate. Traditional conflict approaches involve each side presenting their case and trying to convince the other side they're wrong. This creates a win-lose dynamic where someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. Collaborative exploration treats conflict as a shared puzzle to solve together. Use language that emphasizes partnership rather than opposition. Instead of, "You always interrupt me," try, "I've noticed we both get excited and sometimes talk over each other. How can we make sure we both get heard?" Instead of, "Your idea won't work because," try, "I'm having some concerns about that approach. Can we explore some alternatives together?" Ask questions that invite exploration rather than questions that put people on the defensive. "What would make this work better for you?" is more collaborative than, "Why don't you just do it the right way?" "What am I missing about your perspective?" is more open than, "How can you possibly think that?" The fourth principle is taking responsibility for your own contribution to the conflict. Most people focus entirely on what the other person did wrong and what they need to change. But every conflict involves at least two people, and everyone contributes something to the dynamic. Taking ownership of your part, even if you believe the other person is more wrong, dramatically changes the energy of the interaction. This doesn't mean accepting blame for things you didn't do or apologizing for having needs and boundaries. It means acknowledging ways you might have contributed to misunderstandings, escalated emotions, or made the situation more difficult. I realize I didn't communicate clearly about my expectations. I can see how my tone might have come across as dismissive. I should have brought this up sooner, instead of letting it build up. When you take responsibility first, you often inspire the other person to do the same. You model the kind of mature, relationship-focused approach that leads to genuine resolution rather than temporary truces. The fifth principle is focusing on future solutions rather than past grievances. Many conflicts get stuck because people spend all their time relitigating what happened, who was right, and who was wrong. While it's important to understand what went wrong, the goal should be preventing similar problems in the future rather than proving who was more justified in their reactions. Shift the conversation toward future-focused questions. How can we handle this differently next time? What would need to change for both of us to feel good about this? What agreements can we make going forward? This approach is more productive because it empowers both people to create change rather than just assigning blame. The conflict transformation method requires you to regulate your own emotions throughout the process. When someone is criticizing you or expressing anger, your natural instinct is to defend yourself or counterattack. But transformation requires you to stay curious about their experience while also maintaining your own center. This is where all the previous techniques become crucial. Use the pause protocol to stay calm. Apply reframing to look for the underlying needs beneath aggressive or hurtful words. Practice detachment to avoid taking things personally while still caring about the relationship and the outcome. Remember that conflict transformation is not about avoiding conflict or keeping the peace at any cost. Healthy conflicts can strengthen relationships by addressing real issues and clearing up misunderstandings. The goal is not to eliminate conflict, but to engage in it skillfully, with respect for both people's needs and commitment to the relationship's long-term health. Chapter 9. The Energy Management System. Your emotional state is not just determined by what happens to you, but by your overall energy levels, stress management, and lifestyle choices. When you're physically depleted, emotionally drained, or mentally exhausted, you have much less capacity for emotional regulation. The energy management system ensures that you maintain the internal resources necessary to stay calm and composed, even in challenging situations. Most people think of emotional control as a purely mental skill, but it's actually a whole-body phenomenon. Your brain uses enormous amounts of energy for emotional regulation. When your energy reserves are low, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and impulse control, goes offline first. This is why you're more likely to snap at people when you're tired, hungry, or stressed. The first component of energy management is physical energy optimization. This includes the obvious factors like adequate sleep, proper nutrition, and regular exercise. But it also includes less obvious factors like breathing patterns, posture, and environmental stresses. Sleep deprivation has a devastating effect on emotional regulation. When you don't get enough quality sleep, your amygdala becomes hyperactive, while your prefrontal cortex becomes sluggish. This combination makes you more likely to perceive threats where none exist and less able to control your reactions to those perceived threats. Even one night of poor sleep can significantly impair your ability to handle difficult people and stressful situations. Create a sleep environment that supports quality rest. Keep your bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Avoid screens for at least an hour before bedtime because blue light disrupts your natural sleep hormones. Establish a consistent sleep schedule, even on weekends, to regulate your circadian rhythms. If you struggle with racing thoughts at bedtime, keep a notebook next to your bed and write down anything you're worried about or need to remember. This helps clear your mind for sleep. Blood sugar stability is equally important for emotional regulation. When your blood sugar drops, your body releases stress hormones to try to bring it back up. These stress hormones make you more irritable, anxious, and reactive. Eating regular, balanced meals with protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates helps maintain stable energy levels throughout the day. Avoid the common trap of using caffeine and sugar to manage energy crashes. While these can provide temporary boosts, they often lead to larger crashes later, creating a cycle of energy instability that makes emotional regulation much more difficult. The second component is emotional energy conservation. Just as your body has limited physical energy, your mind has limited emotional energy. Every time you have to regulate a strong emotion, make a difficult decision, or resist an impulse, you use some of your emotional energy reserves. When these reserves are depleted, you become more reactive and less able to maintain your composure. One of the biggest drains on emotional energy is carrying unresolved emotional baggage from past interactions. If you had a frustrating conversation with a coworker in the morning, and you spend the rest of the day replaying it in your mind and imagining what you should have said, you're continuously draining your emotional energy. By the time you get home, you have little left for your family or personal activities. Learn to process and release emotional experiences rather than carrying them with you throughout the day. After any interaction that triggers strong emotions, take a few minutes to consciously process what happened. Acknowledge your feelings without judgment. I'm feeling frustrated because that conversation didn't go the way I hoped. Then consciously choose to let it go. I did my best in that situation, and I'll handle it differently if it comes up again. The third component is attention management. Your attention is a finite resource, and where you focus your attention dramatically affects your emotional state. If you spend your mental energy focusing on things that frustrate, worry, or annoy you, you'll feel frustrated, worried, and annoyed. If you consciously direct your attention toward things that inspire, energize, or calm you, you'll feel more positive and resilient. Most people allow their attention to be hijacked by whatever is loudest, most urgent, or most emotionally charged. They start their day by checking news and social media, filling their minds with information designed to trigger strong emotional reactions. They spend their time at work focused on problems, complaints, and stressful deadlines. They end their day by consuming entertainment that's designed to be dramatic and emotionally stimulating. This pattern of attention management is exhausting and makes emotional regulation much more difficult. Instead, consciously choose what deserves your mental energy. Start your day with activities that center and energize you, whether that's meditation, exercise, reading something inspiring, or simply sitting quietly with your coffee. Throughout the day, regularly redirect your attention away from drama and negativity toward things that support your well-being and goals. The fourth component is environment management. Your physical and social environment has a profound impact on your emotional state and your ability to regulate your emotions. Cluttered, noisy, or chaotic environments create low-level stress that depletes your regulatory resources. Toxic relationships and negative social dynamics do the same thing. Take inventory of your environmental stressors and eliminate as many as possible. This might mean organizing your living and working spaces, reducing noise pollution, or limiting time with people who consistently drain your energy. Create environments that support calmness and focus rather than stress and reactivity. The fifth component is recovery and restoration practices. Just as athletes need recovery time between workouts to maintain peak performance, you need regular practices that restore your emotional and mental energy. This doesn't just mean relaxation, though that's important. It means activities that actively replenish your resources and strengthen your capacity for emotional regulation. Different people find restoration through different activities. Some people restore through solitude and quiet activities, like reading, walking in nature, or creative pursuits. Others restore through social connection and shared activities. Some need physical movement and exercise, while others need mental stimulation and learning. The key is identifying what truly restores you versus what you think should restore you or what other people find restorative. Pay attention to how different activities affect your energy levels and emotional state. Activities that truly restore you should leave you feeling more energized, centered, and capable, not more depleted or agitated. Regular restoration is not a luxury or something to do when you have extra time. It's a necessity for maintaining your capacity to handle difficult people and challenging situations with grace and composure. When you consistently manage your energy levels, you become much more resilient and much less reactive to external stresses. Chapter 10. The Mastery Mindset. Long-term emotional evolution. Developing the ability to never get angry or bothered by anyone is not a destination you reach and then maintain effortlessly forever. It's a continuous process of growth, refinement, and deepening mastery. The people who seem naturally calm and unshakable have developed what I call the mastery mindset, a way of approaching life that treats every challenging interaction as an opportunity for growth rather than a problem to endure. The mastery mindset starts with understanding that emotional mastery is a skill like any other skill. Just as a musician doesn't expect to play complex pieces perfectly without years of practice, you shouldn't expect to maintain perfect emotional composure without consistent practice and refinement. The difference is that with emotional mastery, your practice opportunities come naturally through daily life. Every difficult person you encounter is a chance to strengthen your skills. Most people see challenging interactions as things to avoid or get through as quickly as possible. They try to minimize conflict, avoid difficult people, and create lives that are as emotionally comfortable as possible. While this is understandable, it actually prevents growth and keeps you vulnerable to emotional reactivity when you inevitably encounter situations you can't avoid or control. The mastery mindset reframes difficult interactions as valuable training opportunities. That co-worker who always criticizes your work becomes your patience trainer. The family member who pushes your buttons becomes your detachment practice partner. The stranger who's rude to you in public becomes your compassion exercise. Instead of dreading these interactions or taking them personally, you start to welcome them as chances to prove to yourself that you can stay centered regardless of external circumstances. This shift in perspective is incredibly empowering because it puts you in control of your own development. You're no longer dependent on other people being reasonable, kind, or respectful for you to feel good. You're not waiting for your environment to become less stressful or your relationships to become easier. You're actively using whatever circumstances you encounter to become stronger and more skilled. The first principle of the mastery mindset is progressive challenge seeking. Just as physical training requires gradually increasing resistance to build strength, emotional training requires gradually exposing yourself to more challenging situations to build resilience. This doesn't mean seeking out conflict or putting yourself in dangerous situations. It means consciously choosing to handle progressively more difficult interactions rather than avoiding them. Start with low-stakes situations where the consequences of not being perfect are minimal. Practice staying calm with mildly annoying strangers before trying to maintain composure with your most triggering family members. Use minor irritations like slow service or technical difficulties as training grounds for bigger challenges. As you build confidence and skill, gradually take on more challenging interactions. Volunteer to have difficult conversations at work. Choose to engage with people who have different political or social views rather than avoiding those discussions. Practice maintaining your center in higher pressure situations where more is at stake. The second principle is failure reframing. In the mastery mindset, there are no failures, only data. Every time you react emotionally, lose your temper, or get bothered by someone, you gain valuable information about your current skill level and areas that need more development. Instead of judging yourself for not being perfect, you analyze what happened and use that information to improve your approach next time. Ask yourself specific questions after challenging interactions. What was the trigger that caused you to lose your composure? What physical sensations did you notice before you became reactive? What story did you tell yourself about the other person's behavior? What technique could you have used differently? What would you do if the same situation happened again? This analytical approach prevents you from getting stuck in cycles of guilt, self-criticism, or resignation. Instead of, "I'm just not good at staying calm," you think, "I need more practice with the pause protocol when someone interrupts me repeatedly." Instead of, "That person made me so angry," you think, "I need to work on not taking criticism personally when I'm already stressed." The third principle is pattern recognition and adaptation. As you develop more experience with emotional regulation, you'll start to notice patterns in your reactions and in other people's behavior. You'll recognize your most common triggers. Identify the early warning signs of emotional activation and predict which techniques work best in different situations. This pattern recognition allows you to become proactive rather than reactive. You can prepare for challenging interactions by mentally rehearsing your desired responses. You can recognize potentially difficult situations early and implement preventive strategies. You can adapt your approach based on the specific person and context, rather than using the same techniques in every situation. For example, you might notice that you're most reactive to criticism when you're tired, so you make sure to get adequate sleep before important meetings. You might recognize that certain family members always bring up controversial topics at gatherings, so you prepare neutral responses in advance. You might realize that you handle interruptions better when you're standing rather than sitting, so you adjust your physical position before difficult conversations. The fourth principle is teaching and mentoring others. One of the most powerful ways to deepen your own mastery is to help others develop their emotional regulation skills. When you teach someone else how to stay calm under pressure or how to handle difficult people, you reinforce your own learning and often discover new insights about the techniques you've been practicing. This doesn't mean becoming a formal teacher or coach, though you might choose to do that eventually. It means being the calming presence in your family, workplace, or social circle. It means modeling emotional regulation for others and gently helping them when they're struggling with reactive patterns. It means sharing techniques that have worked for you when people ask for advice. Teaching others also keeps you accountable to your own standards. It's much harder to justify reactive behavior when you've been advising others to stay calm and composed. You become more conscious of your own emotional state because you know others are watching and learning from your example. The fifth principle is continuous learning and refinement. The mastery mindset involves staying curious and open to new approaches, rather than thinking you've learned everything you need to know. Emotional regulation is a deep and complex skill with many layers and subtleties. There are always new situations to navigate, new techniques to try, and deeper levels of mastery to achieve. Read books about psychology, neuroscience, and communication. Study wisdom traditions that have been developing emotional mastery techniques for thousands of years. Learn from people who demonstrate exceptional emotional regulation in their professional or personal lives. Stay curious about what makes people tick and how different approaches might work in different contexts. The mastery mindset also involves regular self-reflection and assessment. Periodically evaluate your progress, identify areas where you've grown, and set new challenges for yourself. Celebrate your improvements while remaining honest about areas that still need work. Adjust your practices based on what you've learned about yourself and what's working best for your personality and lifestyle. Remember that mastery is not about becoming emotionless or perfectly controlled. It's about having conscious choice over your responses and maintaining your inner equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. It's about becoming so skilled at emotional regulation that staying calm and composed becomes your natural default, not something you have to force or fake. How to never get angry or bothered by anyone. Script Part 3, Chapter 11. The Professional Mastery Protocol. The workplace is often the most challenging environment for maintaining emotional control because it combines high stakes with personality conflicts, power dynamics, and constant pressure. Unlike personal relationships, where you can choose to limit contact with difficult people, professional environments require you to work effectively with people you might not like or respect. This chapter will give you the advanced strategies for remaining unshakable in your career while actually accelerating your professional success. The first principle of professional emotional mastery is understanding that your emotional control directly impacts your career trajectory. People who can remain calm under pressure, handle criticism gracefully, and navigate conflict skillfully are perceived as leadership material. Those who react emotionally to workplace challenges are seen as liabilities, regardless of their technical skills or qualifications. This creates a powerful incentive structure every time you choose composure over reactivity. You're not just feeling better in the moment. You're building your professional reputation as someone who can handle responsibility and pressure. Every time you respond to workplace drama with equanimity, you're demonstrating executive-level emotional intelligence. The challenging boss scenario is one of the most common professional triggers. Whether your boss is micromanaging, taking credit for your work, setting unrealistic expectations, or providing harsh criticism, your response to their behavior determines both your immediate experience and your long-term career prospects. The key insight is that challenging bosses are often under tremendous pressure themselves. Their behavior is usually more about their own stress, insecurities, and performance anxieties than about your capabilities. When you understand this context, you can respond strategically rather than personally. If your boss is highly critical, resist the urge to defend yourself immediately or become defensive. Instead, ask clarifying questions that demonstrate your commitment to excellence. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're looking for. Can you help me identify the specific areas where I should focus my improvements? This response shows maturity and redirects the conversation towards solutions rather than blame. If your boss takes credit for your work, document your contributions without making it about confrontation. Send follow-up emails that outline your role in projects. Thanks for the positive feedback on the Johnson project. I'm glad my research on market trends and my proposal for the new pricing strategy contributed to the successful outcome. This creates a record while appearing collaborative rather than defensive. The difficult colleague dynamic requires a different approach because peer relationships are more complex than hierarchical ones. You need to maintain working relationships while protecting yourself from undermining, gossip, or passive-aggressive behavior. The most effective strategy is professional boundaries with personal warmth. Be friendly and collegial in your interactions, but don't share personal information or get drawn into office politics. When colleagues try to involve you in complaining about others or spreading gossip, redirect the conversation. I'd rather focus on how we can make this project successful. Or, I haven't had that experience with them, but let's talk about how to move forward. If a colleague tries to undermine you in meetings, respond with facts rather than emotions. Actually, the data shows. Or, my experience with that approach has been, don't attack their credibility. Just present alternative information confidently. This approach makes you appear knowledgeable and reasonable while highlighting their inaccuracy without direct confrontation. High-pressure deadline situations are where emotional control becomes most critical. When everyone around you is stressed and reactive, your calmness becomes a superpower. You can think more clearly, make better decisions, and often become the person others look to for leadership. Create personal systems for high-pressure periods. Break large projects into smaller, manageable tasks. Set internal deadlines that are earlier than external ones to create buffer time. Communicate proactively with stakeholders about progress and potential challenges rather than waiting for them to ask. These practices reduce external pressure and give you more control over stressful situations. During crisis moments, use your emotional regulation skills to become the stabilizing force in your team. Speak more slowly and deliberately than usual. Ask thoughtful questions that help others clarify their thinking. Focus on solutions rather than problems. What are our options here? And what would need to happen for this to work? Are much more productive than, this is impossible, or why didn't someone think of this earlier? Feedback and criticism, whether in formal performance reviews or casual comments, trigger defensive reactions in most people. But professional mastery requires developing the ability to receive feedback as valuable information rather than personal attacks. When receiving criticism, resist the urge to explain, justify, or defend your actions immediately. Instead, ask questions that demonstrate your openness to learning. Can you give me a specific example of when this was a problem? Or, what would success look like in this area? This approach shows that you're focused on improvement rather than self-protection. If feedback feels unfair or inaccurate, don't argue in the moment. Thank the person for their perspective and ask for time to reflect on their comments. This gives you space to consider whether there might be some truth to their observations and to formulate a thoughtful response if you disagree. Office politics and interpersonal drama are inevitable in most workplace environments. The key to navigating these situations without getting emotionally triggered is maintaining strategic neutrality. You don't have to take sides in every conflict or have opinions about every personality clash. When people try to draw you into conflicts that don't directly involve you, practice diplomatic disengagement. That sounds like something you should discuss directly with them. Or, I don't have enough information to have an opinion on that situation. This keeps you out of unnecessary drama while maintaining good relationships with all parties. Chapter 12. The Family Dynamics Decoder. Family relationships are often the most emotionally charged interactions we navigate because they involve our deepest attachments, longest histories, and most ingrained patterns. The people who raised us, grew up with us, or share our genetic makeup know exactly which buttons to push and often feel entitled to push them. Mastering emotional control within family systems requires understanding the unique dynamics that make these relationships so triggering and developing strategies specifically designed for these complex bonds. The first challenge in family relationships is that everyone operates from outdated versions of each other. Your parents might still see you as the rebellious teenager you were 20 years ago. Your siblings might relate to you based on childhood dynamics that no longer reflect who you are. You might find yourself falling into old patterns of behavior that you've outgrown in every other area of your life. This phenomenon happens because family systems resist change. Every family develops unspoken rules about who plays what role, who has what power, and how conflicts get resolved. When one person starts changing these patterns, the system pushes back to restore its familiar equilibrium, even if that equilibrium is dysfunctional. Understanding this dynamic helps you avoid taking family members' resistance personally. When your mother criticizes your life choices, she might not be commenting on your current reality so much as trying to maintain her role as the person who guides and protects you. When your sibling dismisses your opinions, they might be operating from childhood competition dynamics rather than evaluating your actual ideas. The strategy for handling family enmeshment is creating adult boundaries while maintaining loving connections. This means you can care about family members without taking responsibility for their emotions or allowing them to control your choices. You can participate in family gatherings without getting drawn into historical conflicts or feeling obligated to fix everyone's problems. Holiday gatherings and family events are particularly challenging because they force you to spend extended time with people you might not choose to be around in other circumstances. Everyone's stress levels are elevated. Alcohol might be involved, and old grievances tend to resurface. Prepare for these events by setting realistic expectations and planning your responses to predictable triggers. If Uncle Bob always makes inappropriate political comments, decide in advance that you won't engage in those debates. If your mother always comments on your appearance or life choices, prepare neutral responses that don't escalate the situation. Create exit strategies for overwhelming situations. Drive yourself to events so you can leave when necessary. Set time limits for visits. Have polite phrases ready for disengaging from problematic conversations. I'm going to help in the kitchen, or I need some fresh air, can get you out of tense situations without creating drama. Parenting situations test emotional regulation skills in unique ways because they combine unconditional love with daily frustrations and the enormous responsibility of shaping another human being. Children and teenagers are naturally egocentric and often lack the emotional regulation skills you're trying to model. They can be demanding, ungrateful, and deliberately provocative, all while being completely dependent on your care and guidance. The key insight for parenting with emotional control is that your children's behavior is usually about their developmental stage and individual temperament, not about your parenting competence or their opinion of you. Toddlers have tantrums because their emotional regulation systems are still developing. Teenagers push boundaries because they're neurologically programmed to seek independence, even when they lack the skills to handle it responsibly. When your child is having a meltdown or being defiant, remember that they need you to be the emotionally regulated adult in the situation. If you react with anger or frustration, you're adding to the emotional chaos rather than providing the stability they need to learn regulation skills themselves. Use the same pause protocol with your children that you use in other relationships, but adapt it for the parenting context. Take deep breaths, lower your voice, and remind yourself that this is a teaching moment rather than a personal attack. Ask yourself what your child needs in this moment rather than what they deserve as punishment for their behavior. Dealing with aging parents presents different emotional challenges as the power dynamics shift and you watch people you've always seen as strong and capable become vulnerable and dependent. This transition can trigger grief, resentment, and fear as you confront your own mortality and the reality that your parents are no longer the people who can protect and guide you. The strategy here is accepting the role reversal while honoring the relationship's history. Your parents might need your care and decision-making support, but they still deserve respect for their autonomy and dignity. You can be helpful without being controlling, supportive without being condescending. When elderly parents become difficult, remember that they're often dealing with loss of independence, physical pain, cognitive changes, or fear about their future. Their irritability or resistance to help might be more about grieving their losses than about your specific suggestions or assistance. Extended family drama, including divorced parents, stepfamilies, and in-laws, creates complex webs of competing loyalties and conflicting expectations. You might find yourself caught between people you care about, who are in conflict with each other, or dealing with family members by marriage who have different values and communication styles than you're used to. The principle here is that you cannot fix other people's relationships or resolve conflicts that existed before you arrived on the scene. Don't try to mediate between divorced parents, reform difficult in-laws, or create harmony in blended families. Focus on maintaining your own relationships with each person individually, rather than trying to manage the larger family system. Set clear boundaries about what you will and won't discuss with different family members. You don't have to listen to complaints about other family members or carry messages between people who aren't speaking to each other. That sounds like something you should discuss with them directly. Becomes a standard response to triangulation attempts. Chapter 13. The Social Mastery System. Social situations outside of work and family present their own unique challenges for emotional regulation. Whether you're dealing with strangers in public spaces, acquaintances at social events, or service providers in commercial transactions, these interactions test your ability to maintain composure when you have no ongoing relationship to protect and limited information about the other person's motivations or constraints. The first principle of social mastery is recognizing that most people's behavior in public reflects their internal state rather than their opinion of you. The rude cashier might be dealing with a personal crisis, working a double shift, or being pressured by management to process customers faster. The aggressive driver might be rushing to a medical emergency, dealing with severe stress, or struggling with road rage as a symptom of deeper emotional problems. This understanding helps you depersonalize public rudeness and inconsiderate behavior. When someone cuts in line, speaks dismissively to you, or seems unreasonably demanding, your first assumption should be that their behavior says more about their day, their personality, or their circumstances than about your worthiness of respect. Customer service interactions are particularly testing because they often involve problems, frustrations, and power imbalances. You might be dealing with a company's mistake, trying to get help with a complicated issue, or seeking resolution for something that's causing you inconvenience or expense. The person helping you might have limited authority to solve your problem, be following strict scripts or policies, or be dealing with dozens of similar complaints every day. The key to successful customer service interactions is collaborative problem-solving rather than adversarial demanding. Start conversations by acknowledging the other person's position. I know this probably isn't your fault, but I'm hoping you can help me figure out a solution. This approach makes the representative your partner in solving the problem rather than your opponent in a battle. When you encounter policies or responses that frustrate you, ask questions that help the representative think creatively rather than just following standard procedures. What would you do if you were in my position? Or is there someone else who might have different options available? These questions invite them to go beyond their initial response without making them feel criticized. Social gatherings, networking events, and parties create different challenges because they involve managing multiple relationships simultaneously while often feeling pressure to be entertaining, impressive, or socially successful. You might encounter people who dominate conversations, others who seem uninterested in talking with you, or social dynamics that feel excluding or competitive. The strategy for social events is focusing on connection rather than impression management. Instead of worrying about how you're coming across or whether people are sufficiently impressed with you, focus on being genuinely interested in others and contributing positively to the social atmosphere. When you meet someone who seems disinterested or distracted, don't take it personally or try harder to win their attention. Some people are introverted and need time to warm up. Others might be dealing with social anxiety or be preoccupied with personal concerns. Give them space while remaining friendly and available. If you encounter someone who dominates conversations or seems to be showing off, resist the urge to compete or prove your own worth. Let them have the attention they seem to need while connecting with others who are more interested in mutual conversation. Often, the most socially successful people at events are those who help facilitate connections between others rather than trying to be the center of attention themselves. Dealing with strangers in public spaces requires quick assessments and flexible responses because you have no context for understanding their behavior or predicting their reactions. The person who's acting aggressively on public transportation might be mentally ill, under the influence of substances, dealing with a crisis, or simply having the worst day of their life. Your primary goal in these situations is safety and de-escalation rather than education or justice. You cannot teach strangers appropriate behavior, and attempting to do so often escalates conflicts unnecessarily. If someone is being rude or inappropriate, your best response is usually to disengage politely and create physical distance. When you witness conflicts between other people in public spaces, resist the urge to intervene unless someone is in immediate physical danger. Most public arguments are between people who know each other and have ongoing issues that you don't understand. Your intervention is unlikely to help and might make the situation worse. Online interactions present unique challenges because they lack the non-verbal cues and immediate consequences that usually regulate face-to-face social behavior. People often say things online that they would never say in person, and misunderstandings escalate quickly without the softening effects of tone of voice and body language. The principle for online emotional regulation is the same as for in-person interactions, but it requires extra discipline because the medium makes reactive responses so easy. Before responding to anything that triggers you online, implement an extended pause. Write your response, but don't send it immediately. Come back to it after some time has passed and see if you still want to communicate the same message in the same way. Remember that online interactions are often public and permanent. Responses that feel satisfying in the moment can damage your reputation and relationships long-term. When someone attacks you online, consider whether a response will actually improve the situation or just provide entertainment for observers. Chapter 14. The Neuroplasticity Advantage. Rewiring your brain for permanent change. Everything you've learned so far requires consistent practice to become permanent changes in how your brain operates. Your current emotional patterns exist because they've been reinforced through repetition over months, years, or decades. To replace them with new patterns requires understanding how your brain changes and how to accelerate that change process. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. Every time you practice emotional regulation techniques, you're literally rewiring your brain. The neural pathways associated with reactive responses become weaker, while the pathways associated with conscious choice become stronger. This process explains why emotional control gets easier with practice, and why occasional lapses don't undo your progress. You're not just changing your behavior in the moment, you're changing the underlying brain structures that generate your emotional responses. Each time you choose pause over reaction, reframing over automatic interpretation, or detachment over emotional entanglement, you're making those choices more accessible in the future. The key factors that accelerate neuroplastic change are consistency, emotional intensity, and novelty. Your brain changes faster when you practice regularly rather than sporadically. When you're emotionally engaged with the learning process rather than going through the motions, and when you challenge yourself with new situations rather than just practicing in comfortable contexts. This understanding leads to specific strategies for accelerating your emotional mastery development. First, create daily practice routines rather than waiting for challenging situations to test your skills. Spend time each day visualizing yourself responding calmly to triggering scenarios. This mental rehearsal strengthens the neural pathways associated with regulated responses before you need them in real situations. Second, use emotional intensity to your advantage during practice. Don't just think about staying calm. Imagine yourself feeling genuinely peaceful and composed in difficult situations. The stronger the emotional component of your practice, the more effectively you're rewiring your brain. Third, progressively challenge yourself with more difficult scenarios as your skills improve. If you've mastered staying calm with mildly annoying people, intentionally practice with more challenging personalities. If you can regulate your emotions in low-stakes situations, gradually apply your skills in higher-pressure contexts. The science of habit formation reveals why some people successfully change their emotional patterns while others remain stuck despite good intentions. Habits exist in neurological loops consisting of a cue, a routine, and a reward. To change emotional habits, you need to identify the cues that trigger reactive responses, develop new routines for handling those cues, and ensure that the new routines provide satisfying rewards. For example, if criticism from your boss is a cue that triggers defensive anger, you need to recognize that cue as early as possible and replace your defensive routine with a regulated response routine. The reward needs to be something you value more than the temporary satisfaction of defending yourself, such as maintaining your professional reputation or feeling proud of your self-control. The most effective way to establish new emotional habits is through what researchers call implementation intentions. Instead of general goals like, "I want to stay calm," create specific if-then plans. If my coworker interrupts me in a meeting, then I will take a deep breath and wait for them to finish before responding. These specific plans help your brain automatically choose regulated responses instead of having to make conscious decisions in triggering moments. Understanding the role of stress in neuroplasticity helps explain why emotional regulation skills seem to disappear during high-pressure periods. Chronic stress floods your brain with cortisol, which impairs the functioning of your prefrontal cortex and makes your amygdala more reactive. This means you need to manage your overall stress levels to maintain access to your emotional regulation skills. Stress management for neuroplastic optimization includes physical practices like regular exercise, adequate sleep, and proper nutrition. But it also includes mental practices like meditation, mindfulness, and regular relaxation. These practices don't just feel good in the moment. They create the optimal brain conditions for continued emotional growth. The compound effect of neuroplastic change means that your efforts build on each other over time. Early progress might feel slow because you're working against well-established patterns, but as new pathways strengthen, change accelerates. People who stick with emotional regulation practice often report breakthrough moments when skills that felt forced and artificial suddenly become natural and effortless. This understanding helps you maintain motivation during the inevitable plateaus and setbacks that occur during any learning process. Temporary lapses don't mean you're not making progress. They mean you're still in the process of rewiring deeply ingrained patterns. Each time you notice a reactive response and consciously choose a regulated alternative, you're strengthening your new patterns regardless of whether you feel like you're improving. The social dimension of neuroplasticity reveals why your relationships and environment significantly impact your emotional development. Your brain is constantly adapting to the social contexts you spend time in. If you're surrounded by highly reactive people, your brain adapts by becoming more reactive. If you spend time with emotionally regulated people, your brain adapts by developing greater regulation capacity. This means that part of your emotional mastery strategy should include consciously choosing environments and relationships that support your growth. Seek out people who model the emotional skills you want to develop. Limit time with people who consistently trigger your reactive patterns. Create physical environments that support calmness and focus rather than stress and distraction. Chapter 15. Living as an emotionally unshakable person. When you've mastered the principles and techniques in this system, you don't just handle difficult people better, you become a fundamentally different person. You develop what I call emotional unshakability, a deep inner stability that remains constant regardless of external circumstances. This isn't emotional numbness or disconnection. It's the ability to feel deeply while maintaining your center, to care without being controlled, and to engage fully with life, while remaining free from the emotional chaos that dominates most people's experience. Emotionally unshakable people have certain characteristics that distinguish them from those who are still at the mercy of their reactivity. They have genuine confidence that comes from knowing they can handle whatever situations arise. This confidence isn't based on external achievements or other people's approval. It comes from proven experience managing their own emotional state under pressure. They display consistent emotional responses across different contexts. They don't have a work personality, a family personality, and a social personality that are dramatically different from each other. Their emotional regulation skills create a stable sense of self that shows up similarly in various situations and relationships. They become naturally attractive to others, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because their emotional stability creates a sense of safety and calm that people find appealing. Others seek them out during crises, value their opinions, and enjoy spending time with them because they don't add emotional drama or reactivity to situations. The transformation to emotional unshakability happens gradually as you integrate these skills into your identity rather than just your behavior. At first, you consciously apply techniques when you remember to and when situations seem to warrant them. You pause before reacting because you've learned that's a good strategy, not because pausing feels natural. As your practice deepens, these techniques become more automatic. You find yourself naturally taking deep breaths when you feel stressed, reframing challenging situations without conscious effort, and maintaining perspective during conflicts without having to remind yourself to do so. At the mastery level, emotional regulation becomes part of who you are, rather than something you do. You don't stay calm because you're using a technique. You stay calm because emotional stability is now your natural state. You don't reframe negative situations because you've learned that's helpful. You automatically see situations from multiple perspectives because your mind has been trained to think that way. This identity-level change affects every area of your life in profound ways. Your relationships improve dramatically because you're no longer contributing to emotional escalation and drama. You become a calming influence that helps others regulate their own emotions just by being present. Your professional success accelerates because you're seen as someone who can handle responsibility, pressure, and leadership challenges. You make better decisions because your thinking isn't clouded by emotional reactivity. You communicate more effectively because you're focused on understanding and problem-solving rather than defending and attacking. Your physical health improves because you're no longer subjecting your body to the chronic stress hormones that come from frequent emotional activation. Your sleep improves, your digestion improves, and your immune system functions better because your nervous system spends more time in rest and repair mode rather than fight or flight mode. Your mental clarity increases because you're not wasting mental energy on rumination, resentment, and emotional processing. You have more cognitive resources available for creativity, learning, and strategic thinking because you're not constantly managing internal emotional turmoil. Perhaps most importantly, you develop a deep sense of personal freedom. You realize that no one can make you feel anything without your permission. No situation can force you into emotional reactivity unless you choose to react. No person can control your inner experience unless you give them that power. This freedom isn't loneliness or disconnection. You can still love deeply, feel passionate about causes, and experience the full range of human emotions. The difference is that you experience emotions consciously rather than being overwhelmed by them. You choose your emotional responses rather than having them chosen for you by circumstances and other people's behavior. Living as an emotionally unshakable person means you've become the author of your own emotional experience rather than a victim of external circumstances. You've developed the ability to maintain your inner peace regardless of the chaos around you. You've learned to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be chosen for. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean you'll never feel angry or bothered by anyone ever again. It means that when you do experience these emotions, they don't control you. They pass through you without taking up permanent residence. They inform you without overwhelming you. They motivate you without consuming you. The journey to emotional mastery is one of the most worthwhile investments you can make in yourself because it affects every single day of your life and every relationship you have. It's a gift you give not only to yourself but to everyone whose life you touch. When you're no longer adding reactivity and drama to the world, you become part of the solution to humanity's emotional chaos rather than part of the problem. Most people will live their entire lives at the mercy of their emotional reactions, triggered by every difficult person they encounter, stressed by circumstances they cannot control, and limited by the emotional patterns they developed in childhood. But you don't have to be most people. You have the knowledge and techniques to become emotionally unshakable. The only question is whether you'll commit to the practice required to make this transformation real. The choice is yours, and it's available to you right now. You can continue being bothered by difficult people, or you can become someone who is never bothered by anyone. You can remain reactive, or you can become responsive. You can stay emotionally dependent, or you can become emotionally free. Your future self is waiting for you to make this choice. And once you do, and once you begin this practice in earnest, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way.